So Katie, let me know when we're live.
We're good.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma. Today is Sunday, May 28th. So welcome to those of you there in church in person, those on Zoom, and those joining us on the live stream. So for an opening reading, community can still happen anywhere. Poet Naomi Shah Nye said, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Hope is not lost if we work together. And now we'll go to the chalice lighting. So somebody at church can light that chalice, please.
Thank you. The flame of our chalice this morning is a symbol of the warmth and brightness of our connections. The flame lights our way back together again from our separate lives to our world community.
And now for announcements. So if you have an announcement, go ahead and just raise your hand. Rick, yes.
Oh, yeah, I kind of informed you made this already, but the Wednesday night discussion group has been doing cast talks in the interim, and since Chuck and Andy are going to be traveling the next 3 weeks, we're going to go on hiatus until they return. I'm not sure what that date is, but we will make an announcement and put a link up. We're considering a book, kind of a book study, one that will do a chapter at a time when we come back. Will probably be what we're focused on. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Other announcements? Carrie?
We're having a church picnic on June the 10th at the Highland Yacht Club. Make sure you wear your finest.
Yeah, right. If you have a kayak, a canoe, sailboat, or swim fins, bring those. And we'll do whatever you're on. Or fishing pole.
Yeah.
So there's just all sorts of things we can do out there. And if it rains, don't worry about it. We've got a shelter. So.
You say 10 June?
What?
June 10, yeah.
June 10, I don't know. Show up early if you want to.
We're going to
do.
start about 11.
But you can start earlier than that.
And if you want to go earlier, that's fine. But lunch will be served at 12-ish. And it's the same menu we had before. Barbecue, chicken tenders, potato salad, coleslaw, baked beans. Iced tea will be provided if you want something else to drink. Bring that. Bring a cup to drink. We don't want to do any throwaway cups. So, and I will need RSVP. The Monday next week, whatever that is. If everybody could get their numbers to me by Monday of next week. What is that date?
Memorial Day tomorrow?
No, next week. A week from now.
June 5.
Thank you, June 5. So, if you need any more information, it's not that hard to find. I'm thinking if I can find some balloons, I'll hang them on the gate. There's a gate that goes back to the property, but of course it'll be open. So it's on the road that goes between UTSI and the Officers Club.
Yeah, there's a little, if you come in on Wattendorf Highway from Tullahoma, turn left like you're going to UTSI, you come to a 4-way stop, turn left, and then there's the rec area, there's the conference center, and then
I believe you turn right off of that highway, going toward UTSI.
Off of Wattendorf.
Yeah, you said left.
Can I turn left off of
Right. Turn right off of it.
No, you don't.
Which way are you going?
That's
the best question. Where are you coming from?
Where are you? Okay, hang on.
Okay, first, thanks Tom and Carrie very much for organizing this and making this happen. Much appreciated to all your effort. Okay, Gene, you have an announcement?
Yeah, everybody stay and help eat the chili I brought, but meanwhile, the announcement part is the fact that I goofed and failed to take into consideration that we might have some vegans, and also it's a little bit spicy.
All right. All right. So
I was gonna
yeah,
ask a question. I could bring a bunch of vegetarian stuff because my kids are vegetarian and they may be there, so I'm willing to bring dishes of vegetarian that could be spicy, could be mild, whatever everyone wants. So I just need to get with who's coordinating and find out.
You can bring whatever you want. There'll be another person bringing some
Awesome.
vegetarian food. So,
Good.
yeah.
Excellent.
That chili is today, by the way.
great.
not at the
Oh, today.
Okay, other announcements.
The chili he brought us for today.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, so I have one or two announcements. First is the usual, if you want to support our church financially, you can send a check to P.O. Box 331 in Tullahoma. Secondly, as Carrie mentioned, next Sunday is our annual business meeting. So please do plan to attend. We need a quorum so we can conduct business. The two business items are approval of our budget for next year and election of board officers. So Carrie and John, to you specifically, but others, if you're not going to make it, please email me your proxy. Carrie, what did I just say?
Send email your proxy in.
Thank you, and send it to me, so we do need a quorum to get business accomplished, so much appreciated, everybody. All right, any other announcements? Yeah, Barb.
No announcement, I have a question. If you're here on Zoom, is that considered attendance?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
It's only if you
Wanna make
cannot
sure.
attend on Zoom or in person, then please send a proxy.
Thanks.
Yep, Zoom is fine, yep. Yeah, that's how we conducted the meeting last year, several people were on Zoom. So, any other announcements? No. Okay, so we'll move on now to our responsive reading, and this actually is responsive out of the book. It's 5:18. So those of you at church, if you would open your hymnal 5:18, and those of you on Zoom, if you have the book, go ahead and mute, because you'll come through at a different time than the folks at church. So 5:18, Ojibwa. It's a responsive reading, and it's from the Native American tribe of the Ojibwa people. So I will start, and then the rest of you folks respond. Grandfather, look at our brokenness.
All the human family has stayed in the sacred way straight.
We know that we are the ones who are divided.
And we are the ones who must come back together to walk in the sacred way.
Grandfather, sacred one, teach us love, compassion, and honor.
That we may heal the earth and heal each other.
All right, thank you. All right, so now it's time for our speakers. So Denise, thank you for coming, appreciate it.
It's been so long since I've been here, I had to ask Carrie to remind me how long you want me to talk. Good morning. This is
morning.
hard for me, because when I want to look at the people online, I'm showing you the top of my head.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm glad you're here online with us. My title this morning is In Search of the Shared World, Practicing Spirituality, Democracy, and Hope. And I was really pleased to hear a little bit of Naomi Shihab Nye's poem, Gate A4, which Jim read for us, because I'm going to start with that this morning, except I'm going to read you the whole poem because I really like it, and it's also where I got the title, well, part of the title for this sermon. So, this is Gate A4. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. I'm going to step outside the poem for a second just to say that Naomi is an Arab-American poet. Okay. So, just heard, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing. Help, said the flight attendant. Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this. I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. Shu dao ah. Shu bid uk habibiti. Stani shwe min fadlik. Shu bit si we. The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, no, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who's picking you up? Let's call him. We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. So, I was struck by the final couple of stanzas of that poem. This moment of recognition. This is what I want. This is how I want us to live together, sharing powdered sugar cookies, with dates and nuts in them, and meeting delay with community, forming community. Knowing that we share a world. Not everything is lost. We feel a lot of loss lately. This is these last few years, and it's not just the pandemic, it's lots of other things that came before the pandemic as well. And the prospect of what we see coming at us now in the future. Global climate change is a real thing. We're already feeling it, and we know we'll be feeling it more to come. There is so much loss in our worlds, in our lives, and there is so much less certainty about how human beings are with each other. Our naive optimism about our being able to get along has kind of been, it's taken a battering lately. So, I find some room for optimism in the fact that people say, oh wait, here's a moment of a shared world, and this is what I want more of. This is what we need to do. And so I think we need to nurture hope. We really need to practice democracy strenuously, thoroughly, consistently, everywhere, as often as we can. And always, because I'm a religious leader, I have to say spirituality is something also that we need to practice, because it will help us to find, to recognize, and to create a shared world, a world that we want to live in because we share it with each other and with the rest of what is. So I'm seeing in the things I'm reading and bumping into, and of course this won't surprise those of you who've known me for a few years, but the things I tend to read and bump into as I'm browsing Google or whatever tend to be things about connection. They tend to be seventh principle things, the interconnected web. But I see people doing work about, always we've done this, about humans and other humans, so that's a level of sharing. But also there are people doing some really interesting thinking about humans and other creatures, other critters, the humans and other animals. I don't say humans and animals because guess what? We are animals. So humans and other animals, other humans and plants, humans and other life forms. It turns out between the animals, or not even between, but there's plants and there's animals, and then there's other things that are alive. And there are other things that keep the animals and the plants alive. It's very interesting to me that we have many, I don't even know the right scale of numbers, living things inside us, inside each of our cases of skin. There's all sorts of things going on that until very recently we weren't in the habit of thinking about. There's a lot more sharing going on in the world as it is. I also am hearing people talk about the more than human world, and really interestingly to me, that more than human world includes our technologies and the intelligences we are creating and experimenting with. And of course I'm thinking especially of artificial intelligence. But we're in a pivotal moment here. People I know who work with AI say this is like a turning point for the human species. I feel it a little less acutely, but I haven't been sure whether to be afraid of that or not. I've been reading some things that, they're fear-mongering and they make me afraid, but I've been reading some other things. There's a book called Ways of Being, Animals, Plants, Machines, The Search for a Planetary Intelligence. It's written by James Bridle, and I haven't been able to figure out who he is exactly. He's British, and he's been described as an artist in some little, one-line bios. But I don't really know much about him. But this book made me not afraid of AI, at the same time that it made me more appreciative of the natural world, the things we share with animals, and the ways animals and plants and technology all cooperate to give us a wider intelligence, all of us. It was a fascinating read. I recommend it. But he talks a lot about the more than human world, and he explicitly means more than humans, including the technologies we create. And of course, when I think of the shared world, I always think of the seventh principle, the seventh Unitarian Universalist principle, which is respect for the web of all existence, of which we are a part. And all that technology now is part of the web. It's in a sense it's natural because we made it and we're part of nature. So, a shared world, because we are human, involves, I think, talking, conversation, listening, sharing. That everything that's in this poem. This poem's beautiful. It's very concrete, very, very limited, and yet sort of touches on a lot of things that are very deeply human. And all the conversations, and it also highlights how talking and sharing, making connections, is both really simple. Here's a human being, I'm a human being, let's talk. Here's a group, let's share. I'm very excited, we will do that later. And that gets complicated quickly. So it's really nice to say, oh, we're human beings together, we respect each other, we can talk and listen and have a conversation. And you and I know that human beings sharing ideas all too often leads to polarization, where people pick sides. And there are things about our brains and the way we were programmed to survive in other times and other places, and maybe in this one too, that we tend to pick sides. We tend to create sides where there don't need to be sides sometimes. So that talking, that listening, that back and forth sometimes becomes conflict, and then gets sort of ossified into polarization, which is conflict in and of itself is really just, oh, you're different than I am. You think something different, you feel something, you react to this situation differently. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can just be a thing that is. But when it becomes one of us must be wrong and one of us must be right, this is when polarization happens. And we've seen this, how the workings of democracy in our country have lately tended to become more and more about polarization and less about conflict that is used creatively to create a situation that supports the greater good of everyone. So building community and nurturing connection also in this poem involves sharing food. We have these wonderful cookies that are described in powdered sugar that can spread everywhere. And that's lovely. And food and sharing food also slides in sometimes to the territory of fear and harm. As long as I can remember, starting when I was 3, 4, trick-or-treating, I remember there were sort of like, you worry. When I was 4, I don't think we worried about it. Because we had neighbors who made caramel-covered apples every year. And when I was 4 and 5, I was allowed to take those home. And then we moved, and we didn't know our neighbors as well. But also then in the 70s, there are all these stories of people putting razor blades inside apples. So you didn't take fresh apples anymore. You didn't, and there was just a lot of paranoia for the rest of my childhood about trick-or-treating, So everything has to be wrapped up and no more homemade anything. Because in sharing food, we can intentionally or unintentionally poison each other. And then there's this issue of non-nourishing offerings. We feed each other, but we're also very aware that what is nourishing for me may not be for you. And there's a whole other level of difficulty that arises. It's not as simple as let's break bread together, as much as we wish it were. And it still is worth doing, and I'm glad we're having lunch this afternoon together. So also in this poem, this shared world that was created at Gate A4, there is the joy of discovering connections. And also this sense, I'm reading into the poem here a bit, but I'm going to include with that discovery of connections a choice to be curious rather than to be certain. So, and you can see that even, so you have this woman who's wailing and just collapsed, and she's wearing foreign clothing, And instead of being certain she's a threat, the people around her say, what's happening? Can somebody help us figure this out? And that's meeting something that puts everybody on edge with curiosity instead of certainty or fear. So this discovering of connections happens regularly when we are together. We always look for, who do you know that I know, or where have you been that I've been, or what do we both like to eat? And powdered sugar probably isn't a really bad place to start with that. And sugar's complicated. Good things to eat are complicated. We run into issues of addiction and addiction to control. Well, but you don't want to eat too much, and we want to make sure, you know, you know, how many of us walk around the world and make assumptions about people by how their bodies look or how their bodies are shaped? We are trained from an early age to do that. So even those connections that we have are vulnerable to the human addictions to control and to certainty. Our brains really would like sometimes for us to just nail things down. I see this or I hear that and I know this. It's a shortcut. It saves our precious cognitive resources for what we think are more important things. And sometimes those shortcuts don't take us anywhere problematic, but a lot of times they do. And so, what do we do with all of this? It's complicated, and it's not. And let's see. There are things that I think we need to just decide. So, for instance, this curiosity over certainty. Another poet, Margaret Wheatley, has a poem called Turning to One Another. And she says in that poem that she invites us to be intrigued by differences. She says, expect to be surprised, treasure curiosity more than certainty. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. And she says too, I think this is a beautiful light on Naomi's poem. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. And I love that. I love that, you know, the problem at Gate A4 is that nobody understands what's going on. Once people understand, once people have found the connections, oh, you and my father know 10 people in common. There are real connections here. Oh, we're all covered in powdered sugar. There's an instant connection. It is suddenly not a threatening situation. It is a paradigm of what we wish the world were more like. So, how do we get there? And I'm going to propose that we need to move, we need to choose experience that help us move from figuring out what's wrong with the world to actually experiencing what a shared world could be like. That's part of the reason some of us go to church. Not all of us experience this at church, but some of us do. We come to church, we bring our food, we share, we exchange stories, we enjoy each other's company. That's church. Has always been. Religious gatherings, faithful communities of faith of all flavors and sizes and shapes and historical settings have always been places where people come to share a world, to imagine what human life together could be, and to practice doing it. And so some of that practice is just real down to earth. It's who's going to bring the food and how do we share the work with each other instead of overworking some people and just serving other people. How do we, in ways that support everyone, be human together? And this brings me to the democracy part of my sermon. I could talk a lot about democracy. I actually got into a really, I mentioned AI earlier, so I'll mention it again. I got into a really interesting conversation about democracy with, I can't remember which chatbot it was. Where I said, so, I noticed that I go to dictionaries, some of you may know this about me, and etymologies. So what's a word? No, so what does democracy mean? And I noticed that, I know a smattering of Greek, and demos is the people. That's fine. Kratos. That one gets, if you look in the English dictionaries, it gets translated from the Greek in different ways. And one of them is power. But another one is more agency. So we use, in English, most commonly use democracy to be government by the people. But democracy can also mean the power of the people to get stuff done. It's not necessarily a governmental authority. It's not power over. It is power and agency to make things happen. So practicing democracy means knowing and understanding how we as people in groups make things happen. And it also means attending to issues of welcome and inclusion. Who's the we? Who is the people? And we define that in all sorts of ways. In the United States, the people is often citizens, which has a legal definition. Sometimes it's voters, which is a different set of people. It is not very consistently anybody who happens to be within our boundaries at any given time. But it could be. We could govern with and for the benefit of anybody who happens to be here. We generally have chosen not to. But we could. And I think it is, no matter how we decide we're doing this, it is always the case that some people fall through the cracks. And that's, I think, going to happen no matter what. But we could choose to pay better attention to that. We could choose to figure out what is needed so that people don't fall through the cracks. And by falling through the cracks, sometimes I mean people who should have rights don't. And also sometimes I mean people who don't have rights, or like maybe the right to vote, are then, they lose a lot of their human rights. Things that we actually say we believe should be the case for everyone should be fed and safe and more. How we define that more goes lots of different ways. But no one should, just because they're not defined as being part of the governing voters, should be denied the chance for a decent human existence and human flourishing. And we could pay better attention to those edges around how we define ourselves as a people. So I think we need to practice democracy. I'm on a little kick right now where I'm saying to groups of UUs specifically, we Unitarian Universalists need to practice democracy, because democracy in our country has not been well practiced in the last several years, and I'm afraid we're forgetting how to do it. And I feel like we have, as a whole, we've sold our democracy to the highest bidders, and we're not even getting the proceeds of that sale. So we, in our little UU communities, need to think hard about how do we make sure what we do is done democratically. We say democracy is one of our 7 or 8 most important values if you read the 7 principles. So if democracy is that important, how do we make sure? And I don't have an answer to that question. How do we make sure that we understand what democracy is and practice it? And in some ways, it's both easier and harder to do it on a small scale, like a small congregation like this one or the one that I lead in Nashville. Because you have a limited number of people, which often means that you have a few people who are doing almost everything and other people who are participating less, but then they also kind of get left out of the decision-making processes too. So that's hard. Whereas when you have a bigger group, you have lots of people in charge, and usually one or two of them at least are parliamentarians and communications experts, and they make sure that everybody's invited. They make sure that everybody's vote is counted and decisions are made and recorded and communicated, which often in smaller congregations you just don't have the personnel to do that, which leaves people out. So it's something we all, whatever kinds of congregations we have, need to just be paying attention to and thinking about and paying attention to each other, making sure that we are talking to and sharing with each other. I think too, because we are faithful people, that we need to, at least sometimes, think about spirituality and how we practice spirituality. Democracy is a spiritual practice. I knew somebody at First UU years ago who used to say, committee meetings are my spiritual practice. Bless you. He was an important leader in that congregation because committees were his spiritual practice. He recognized how important democracy was in showing up and helping other people to show up and to get things done, to get them done in line with our values. This is why you have committee meetings. And y'all are mostly spared committee meetings, right? Because you have a lot of committees of one.
Right.
I'm guessing, yeah, that's how it is at Greater Nashville too. But there's still board meetings. I remember board meetings. But those can be spiritual practices. But also individually and together in groups and study groups in the Wednesday night group, we do things to help us learn and experience humility in the sense of understanding who we are and where we fit into the world, not in the sense of humiliation or degradation. So humility is knowing who you are, neither overselling nor underselling that. And we learn how to be connected to each other. And we get a sense of, and this is related to humility, we get a sense of who we are individually and with each other and who we are not. Where are our limits? And we only can do that together sometimes. And we also get a sense of the power that we each have, our connection to everything, and the sense of ourselves as part of all that is. And I think that is all properly part of the work of spirituality. And there are so many different ways. You all know that even within your little congregation. You have people who watch TED Talks and discuss them. You have people who meet and sit in Buddhist meditation and talk and think about that. And there are lots and lots of ways to practice spirituality. And we do that alone and we do it together in groups. And those groups talk to each other. I see. I mean, if you just read the email that comes out, on the email list here in this congregation, you see those different groups connecting with each other, overlapping, carrying on conversations. So we practice spirituality, we practice democracy, and I think we need to practice hope. That's really hard. That kind of takes me back. I noticed the song that we listened to for the meditation was Smile. And if I'd known, I would have gone and looked up all the lyrics. But the only one I can actually remember is Smile though your heart is breaking. Yeah. And I'm not going to say that I want you to pretend you're happy when your heart is breaking, because I don't. But I do want, when you feel hopeless or when your heart is breaking for yourself, for your family, for your city, for your country, your state, your world, for the beings that share that world, I also want you to know it's not over yet. We're still in the middle of the story. It's going on, and we still have a great lot of power to make it go better than it's been going. And so we need to choose to be hopeful, and we need to find the practices that sustain us in feeling hope and doing things that might change the world. And it just being hopeful has to be practiced every bit as much as democracy needs to be practiced. It's like, it's like resistance training. My arms are just going to wither away the older I get unless I pick up some weights or bands or whatever and do the thing. I just do it so that it's there when I need it. We just have to do it. And some of that practicing hope looks like fun to me. It's talking with each other, it's laughing together, it's eating together, creating community like you do here. And sometimes it's creating community out of fear and conflict. When you're willing to sit with it and feel it and talk to each other and listen well to each other. So often, that leads to community. And that brings hope. So practicing hope is about sharing with each other, and it's about enjoying each other's company as much as it is anything else. So, in the end, I go back to the very end of gate A4. Naomi Shihab Nye says to us, this can still happen anywhere. All is not, or she says, not everything is lost. We have lost so much, but we haven't nearly lost everything. There is so much that can still happen anywhere. Here, the place you go tomorrow, the place you go Tuesday, the places some of you go together next month. Things can happen, and that we need to hope. We need to be spiritually grounded so that when we're in a moment, when a choice is being made or a new something is open to being practiced, we're ready. We're ready to make the brave choice, the choice that centers on love. We're ready to listen instead of running away in fear. Not all is lost. Anything can happen, anywhere, anytime. And we get to be the people to make that happen, to make something happen. I don't even know what it is. But we get to do it. There's lots of other people who get to do it too. So we need to go and talk and listen and remember we need to practice. But there's always hope. There's always hope. And there's always going to be loss. And there's always going to be hope. And I had a whole other thing to read to you about love, but I guess I'll have to come back sometime. Oh, it is. Yeah. So, thank you. It is good to be with you. It is good to practice democracy and spirituality and community with you. And I wish I had brought powdered sugar.
Thank you, Denise. Very good. Really enjoyed it. So now we will close with our traditional closing hymn as we leave this friendly place. And I guess let's try singing it again together. So Cass and I will sing it. You guys at church sing along, and those of you on Zoom, go ahead and mute because you'll come through at a different time than the rest of us. So if you guys at church will stand, we'll go ahead and sing this. All right.
As we leave this friendly place, love gives light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return.
All right, folks, let's take a 10-minute